Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today. I am Dr. Elizabeth Phillips. I'm Director of Education and Engagement at the Woolf Institute, and I'll tell you just a little bit about the Woolf Institute in a moment. But the first thing to say is that we're so pleased to welcome our visiting fellow this summer, Dr. Delvyn Case. And this event is sort of the centerpiece of his visiting fellowship, and he has curated this event. And we also have a summer school happening right now, and some of our summer school students are here in the audience, and he'll be doing a workshop with them tomorrow morning based on this event as well. But we're so pleased that all of you could come and join us. We need to also thank the Spalding Trust, who provided a grant that helped to make this fellowship possible. We need to thank Westminster College, who co-sponsored this event by making this beautiful room available to us without cost. And if you're not familiar with the Woolf Institute, I'll just tell you a little bit about who we are. So you can't see outside, but just outside across the courtyard that's right behind me is a large modern building, and that's our building. We are an interfaith institute. We specialize in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, and we do work to better understand those faiths, to understand historic and contemporary relations between those faiths, and to work to build better relations between people of all different beliefs and worldviews in society today. And we do that through research, as well as education and public engagement. And we're really pleased whenever we can have an event like this that brings together someone's scholarly expertise with artistic creation and expression, and the education that will help provide. As a further bit of education, just to let you know, the microphones and the cameras are because the event is being recorded, and that will be available for the composers and the performers to use for their own uses, but also for us to use as an interfaith educational resource. There may be a little bit of time for question and answer at the end, and if that does happen, just so you know, this is being recorded. The final thing to say is that one of the things that inspired the theme for this event was that it seemed to us in a time when we have a lot of reasons, frankly, to be anxious about how religious people are and are not getting along in the world today, the massive geopolitical consequences and implications of that, the climate crisis, and what we see happening to the world around us, that it's important and meaningful for us to pause and think together in different ways, in creative and expressive ways, about what different belief systems say about creation and how we can explore that together. And I'm so thankful to Del for organizing all of this, for our wonderful composers who've joined him in composing these pieces, and our scholarly panel that will be discussing it afterwards. At the end, there will be drinks at the back, so I hope that you can stay and join us for a drink. But now, I will not delay any further to hand over to Del. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips, and thank you very much to everyone here for joining us at this, what I think is going to be a very unique event. So thanks to the Spalding Trust, to the Woolf Institute, and I also want to acknowledge that my presence here is partially being supported by an organization that I founded, imagine that, called Deus Ex Musica. And what we do is we create resources and events that use new sacred music or new pieces of music that engage with sacred topics as a springboard for discussion about religion. And we have a particular interest in doing interfaith and ecumenical work. The reason for that is that we believe that music has a unique ability to foster the kinds of honest, open-minded, and meaningful conversations that are the starting point for developing mutual understanding and respect between people of different faith traditions. And I think that's going to happen tonight. I think it's going to be very clear that it's going to happen, I think, in a very powerful way. So the event is going to follow the format of a lot of the projects that Deus Ex Musica has developed. It's basically a hybrid performance discussion event. So it's not just a concert. We will have live performance of brand new music, but there will also be a chance for certain people to engage with the themes and ideas that are presented with the music. So the music is essentially functioning as a lens through which to think about certain themes for this evening, themes related to the work of, particularly the work of the Woolf Institute. In addition to hearing 3 brand new pieces of music created just for this event tonight, you're also going to hear from an august panel of Cambridge-affiliated scholars who will have a conversation along with us about some of these themes. And the goal of the event is to use music as a springboard for thinking about the commonalities and the differences between particularly the 3 Abrahamic faiths, but generally speaking, all the people who are here today and the ways that we engage with the really interesting questions facing us in the world today. So the theme we're going to focus on is, as you know, creation. And I think it's a good choice because it's universal in scope, it's relevant to all of us, and also it has rich resonances when considered within artistic and religious contexts. So when we think about the term creation, at least from the perspective of the 3 Abrahamic faiths, we probably think about the book of Genesis. And in this book, we first discover God, and we first discover God in the act of creation. And of course, many other religions understand God as a creator as well. God created the universe, that includes humans. Genesis tells us that God made us in God's image, and of course, the old saw is that we then return the favor, right? But one very powerful way of thinking about how humanity might reflect the image of God as creator is the fact that we are creators, and we are pretty much uniquely, at least we're the species that does the most creating at least in artistic ways, though we create other things as well, tools and language, et cetera, et cetera. As we explore the nature or the theme of creation through artistry and new works of music, we also can sort of use that experience as a way of thinking about God's creation and what the act of creation might mean for all of us. Now, of course, humans don't just create things. We create things and we usually talk about them. We are at a university here, so the critical mindset and the critical approach to what we do is very important. And of course, a huge part of the responsibility of our creativity as humans is to think about why we create and the responsibilities we have towards our creations. Now, Dr. Phillips mentioned, of course, the issue of climate change and environmental degradation. We humans have created a lot of things that are making God's creation less fertile or hospitable than it perhaps used to be. And it's going to take the unified efforts of all humans, all humanity, to change course. I think that faith communities have an important role in the work to be done, not just by providing a moral or ethical framework for their followers and perhaps demonstrating, if done in the right way, a moral and ethical framework for all humanity through which to understand the issue, but also by creating and fostering the symbolic language that helps us as we engage with this topic, the stories, the songs, the pieces of art that are going to speak to all of us humans in affective or emotional ways, and in so doing, remind us of our common humanity, and hopefully also inspire us. Now, the pieces you're going to hear tonight are not anti-climate change anthems by any chance, but they all engage with the topic of creation in ways that I think are relevant, not just with the religious traditions from which the texts come, but also the general understanding of God's creation and the challenges that we are faced with as we try to be good stewards of it today. So we are going to, here's how the event's going to happen. Well, actually, it started about a year ago when we developed this event. And what happened is I put together a group of musicians, Samia and Ari and myself, and our charge was to create a piece of music that engages with this theme of creation. And tonight what's going to happen is we are going to hear each of those pieces presented live for the first time ever. Each of them is going to be preceded by couple of words by the artist, if they so choose, to sort of help you think about, or sort of to introduce to you the ways that each of us were thinking about our work. Then we're going to take a quick pause, and we're going to have a chance to hear all those pieces again right in a row, almost like a set. Now, each of these pieces is less than 5 minutes, so this goes by pretty quick. So the first half of the event is essentially performances of these pieces. And then in the second half, we will do a little bit of a stage reset. We'll have the panel join the artists on stage, and we'll have sort of a 25 or 30-minute discussion about what we just heard, how it connects to the theme of creation. And the question that I think we're going to think about, there are two questions essentially. One is, how does each piece reflect the theme within the context of creation thought of as both artistic and religious? And the second might be a little broad and maybe connected more to what the Woolf Institute is trying to do, which is to ask, how might the arts function uniquely to open up our thinking about interfaith dialogue? What might be special about the arts that allows us to come together in ways that help us to effectively and meaningfully explore the commonalities we have as people representing different faith traditions? So that's what's going to happen this evening. It's simple. Obviously, we'll solve all the problems by the end, by 7:30 or so. But so to begin the event, I'd like to invite Samia up here to perform the first piece.
You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Hold me, fold me into your arms. Hold me, fold me into your arms. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Crack through this false ego, dissolve this small self, and carry me whole to my home. Crack through this false ego, dissolve this small self, and carry me whole to my home. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Pure presence is wealth, your pain is a strength. It's not what you know, nor what you own. Pure presence is wealth, your pain is a strength. It's not what you know, nor what you own. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. In breath realize, just let me rise. In death, break me into the dawn. In breath realize, just let me rise. In death, break me into the dawn. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Hold me, fold me into your arms. Hold me, fold me into your arms. You come like a gift, lifting me clear, lifting me clear, lifting me clear from the storm. Thank you. Del said say a couple of words. I wanted to just sing straight away because I think the song says it all. Just one word about it, though. For the next time I sing it, the tradition I come from, it's completely acceptable to join in. And since a lot of the things I'm doing are repeats, next time, do join in. Thank you.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you for Del for organizing this amazing event. And just being here in the rehearsals even, I had the chance to listen to Samia's song, and I'm thrilled to be here just so that I've actually heard this wonderful music. I was asked to say a few words about my music, and it's funny, we didn't know we each had freedom to choose the texts, and I ended up, after many deliberations, choosing a text by Rumi, and so did Samia. It's quite by extraordinary coincidence, but there it is. So the text I chose speaks about death, which is inevitable, and about the afterlife and reincarnation. Now, being Jewish, it's not exactly things that Jews believe in, but neither am I, strictly speaking, representing definitely not orthodoxy in Judaism. Probably I could say I'm a sort of rather free thinker. I'm interested in spiritualism, absolutely, but I incorporate into that Buddhism and different texts that speak about spiritualism. Therefore, I chose this text, which really spoke to me in a very direct way. So how you'll hear in the music, how does it actually portray some or come in contact with the text, the music and the text. When I read the text, I immediately sort of thought of a kind of the inevitability of death being represented by a ticking of a clock, sort of ticking on, bringing us ever so closely to the final end. And yet there's always this idea of, well, it's not really the end, it's the beginning of a new life. And so that's one aspect of it. Then there's also a kind of a bell that you will hear ringing every so often. Can you just give us that D sharp, F sharp sort of. That sound is going to repeat ever so often in a much less frequency than the ticking of. There's different clock tickings in different paces, but it's very. You can really identify when it happens, and then also because it's a text that comes from the Middle East or Far East, I'm not sure how you would call it. somewhere in between. I thought it would be wrong to have the vocal part do a purely operatic vocal production. If somehow it doesn't come in contact with that sort of text, where in that region, the sort of singing, as you heard with Samia's singing, but not only, singing is very throatal, not the sort of production you would hear in Rigoletto, say. So there's a sort of a transformation going on in the music where the singer has to apply different types of vocal production to make it sort of maybe bring the Middle East into the West, back and forth. So there, I think that's about what I can say about the music, and the rest of things I can say later in the panel. Thank you. Enjoy.
Eskdar.
So in 50 years, you'll be able to say you were there when that piece was given its world premiere. So, so thank you so much for joining us to hear the first two pieces, and now I have the opportunity to share my work as a composer. I chose a really, I think, a pretty funny, ironic, lighthearted poem by E.E. Cummings, the American poet, who was a Unitarian, but was not afraid to engage with questions and issues and topics from religion in his work. Oftentimes we think of E.E. Cummings as sort of more spiritually minded than orthodox, and he certainly wasn't orthodox, but it's surprising how much sort of elements from the Christian tradition show up in his work. I work from within the Christian tradition. I write a lot of sacred music that engages with biblical texts and ideas from Christian theology. But I was looking for a poem that would sort of fit the theme of the evening. And I felt like within the context of this kind of event, that the poem I found was frankly, it seemed perfect to me. I couldn't believe that I found it. Actually, my wife passed it along to me, so thank you very much. So I can't say I found it, but I was very happy to have recognized its value when it was passed along to me. And I decided to set it, even though I had been looking for maybe something from a medieval Christian mystic poet, or maybe a lyric poem from the 19th century. Maybe I was thinking about Herbert, or I was thinking about Auden, or I was thinking about, I'm not sure. I don't know. There are so many great, devotional poems that I could have chosen, but this one just, I liked it because it was, again, a little bit ironic, poking fun at all of us for taking things too seriously, while at the same time exploring the seriousness of this topic, sort of from sort of a side angle. So it's a short poem that Birdie and Calvin are going to bring to life in my musical setting. I would ask you, there's a little bit of an Easter egg in this piece of music. If you are a churchgoer, you might recognize the quotation of a hymn that's sort of buried in there. I won't give away the Easter egg yet. But that was kind of my way, not only to gesture towards the Christian tradition a little more clearly, but also to sort of allow me to bring my own faith into this work, even though the poem is not sort of explicitly engaging with an element from the Christian tradition. So see if you hear the little echo of the hymn. When we talk about the quotation later, I think the theology of it might be a little more apparent, but I'll save that for the next time. So.
Philosophers, pitch and poach has the naughty thought of science. Prodded thy beauty. How often have religions taken thee upon the scraggy knees, squeezing and buffeting thee, that thou mightest conceive gods. But true.
Did anybody pick up the Easter egg at the end? It's an Easter hymn. Yeah, exactly. It's the day of resurrection. So, this is my way of sort of getting in the idea, what is spring, metaphorically within the Christian tradition, the new life coming out of death, the seed to something else. So that's my little quote from that hymn that brings in sort of a specifically Christian a dimension of that in that poem. But, as a typical modernist, I add a bunch of wrong notes to make sure you don't quite get it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hear those three pieces again as a set. So I think there might be first of all, it's a great chance to get another crack at thinking about the question, hearing the music again, becoming a little more familiar with it. But also, I think it will be interesting to hear the resonances between the pieces as we hear them in one sort of 11 or 12-minute set. Of course, these pieces were constructed or composed completely independently. So any consonances or connections you hear are purely the work of the Spirit, if you will, or kismet. But I think you're going to hear some interesting connections that maybe weren't necessarily planned. So, shall we begin?
I didn't really say too much about my song, so I'll just break the order and just tell you a little bit. As Ari said, it is actually based on the words of Rumi. I'm from Pakistan. I'm from a Muslim tradition. I would not call myself a Muslim, so just want to make that clear. But I am from that tradition. And when Del asked me to do this, I looked at various sacred texts, and Rumi just, it came it was very easy to find something that really resonated for me. And then I realized that I've actually been a Sufi poet my whole life. I didn't realize that almost everything I've ever written is actually from that tradition. I hadn't realized it till I did this. So thank you, Del, for making me realize actually what tradition I come from. So yeah, like a gift. My daughter says, "Who are you singing this to?" And that is the question, isn't it? You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Hold me, fold me into your arms. Hold me, fold me into your arms. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Crack through this false ego, dissolve this small self, and carry me whole to my home. Crack through this false ego, dissolve this small self, and carry me whole to my home. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Pure presence is wealth, your pain is your strength. Pure presence is wealth, your pain is a strength. It's not what you know, nor what you own. It's not what you know, nor what you own. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. In breath realize, just let me rise. In death break me into the dawn. In breath realize, just let me rise. In death break me into the dawn. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. You come like a gift, lifting me clear from the storm. Hold me, fold me into your arms. Hold me, fold me into your arms. You come like a gift, lifting me clear, lifting me clear, lifting me clear from the storm. Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. philosophers pitch and poke has the naughty thumb of science. Prodded thy beauty, often have religions taken thee upon the scraggy knees, squeezing and buffeting thee, that thou mightest conceive God's. Incomparable couch of death, thy rhythmic lover, thou answerest them only with spring.
So we're just going to rearrange the stage a little bit and invite our panelists to come up.
Check 1, 2. Okay. So yeah, please see. So thank you very much for the panelists who are joining us here. You've had a chance to hear from the musicians about the music that we created. So I thought what we could do is, rather than try to organize the conversation in a way that's super logical, maybe allow the spirit to move a bit, and maybe ask if each of our panelists could provide some initial thoughts or responses, sort of from a global perspective, and we can maybe see how that goes. Does that make sense? Let's go first, Danielle, or how do you feel? You want? Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Del, to start off for organising this. This has been really interesting. As someone who spends a lot of time looking at music from the 19th century, this has been very eye-opening. and music that I don't get to spend much time with anymore. It's great to hear different interpretations of the same theme. I think what all of the pieces did for me was remind me about sort of the cyclical nature of a lot of discussion about creation. And particularly the fact that sort of the idea of creation and death, that almost kind of two sides of the same coin. So whether we're sort of thinking about it as quite a human process going sort of walking towards death and new life, or whether we're thinking about it in terms of the religious cycle, and even in terms of the music of Samia's song, the idea that we've got these repeated refrains that come back and back and back. all of it just, to me, sort of reminded me of this kind of cyclical nature of what we're talking about, in very different ways. And even one of the things that struck me with Del's song as well was the idea of how much music, but also religious ideas and thoughts are based on what have come before. So musically, we're using a lot of pastiche, which is something that we only understand by having been experiencing music from from childhood. And so everything, as I said, sort of reminds me of this very human sort of cyclical thing of coming back to the same idea and reconsidering the same thoughts from different angles. So that's my overall thought.
Great, thank you all. Thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful, wonderful music. I found myself thinking much, as you were saying, about the cycles of life and death and birth and rebirth, about the place of something like decreation and recreation within creation. In what ways are things which have perhaps gone wrong or are not as they should be decreated and taken apart in order to be remade anew and fresh. And that's at least something that's quite interesting both theologically but also within these artistic works. And so thinking of these as not, as it were, simply reflecting the radiance of divine glory or the sort of splendour of the natural world, but actually as something like a kind of moral judgment, going back to one of the things that Beth was saying at the beginning of the sort of state of the world right now, and the way in which within this there's almost a kind of prophetic witness as well as a sort of theology of glory, as it were. I have lots of thoughts on the individual pieces, but I can talk about these in a minute.
Thanks very much. Yes, I'm something of an interloper here, not really being a music expert, so I'm going to start probably with a kind of dusty philological orientalist comment about the translations. Having done translation myself, I'm not really sure I have an answer, but to what extent, when we appropriate the discourse of somebody from a different culture, a different time and space, can we edit out things that are not familiar to our worldview? And to what extent is that necessary in order to let something of that voice make sense to us in our very strange late modern sensibilities? And certainly the translations that I saw are like 1,000 miles from what Rumi himself would have envisaged or recognized as being rendered into a kind of benign, inoffensive, New Age wash of concepts, and specifically Islamic vocabulary has been taken out. It may be necessary to do that in order to allow him to have a name in the modern West at all, but if we're talking about cyclicity, Rumi's worldview is very much the monotheistic idea. There's a creation, there's time, there is judgment, there's heaven and hell, he wasn't a reincarnationist at all. But the other thing that occurred to me was that I'm not really sure how much modern music has done with the idea of creation. I suppose it's the biggest subject of all. In the age of Handel, I suppose, and Bruckner a little bit, quite Catholic and quite old-fashioned in his worldview. You could still do that. But how many major Western composers in the last 150 years have really tackled the idea of creation? Even Wagner, who pretends to be talking about everything, doesn't actually tell you how everything begins. You just get the Rhine maidens singing away, and then the gold is still, you're not told who made the Rhine maidens, and at the end the gold goes back to them. Is it cyclical, or is it a kind of Schopenhauerian Buddhistic idea of everything going round and round? He doesn't talk about that. Perhaps we can't any longer. Even somebody like Michael Tippett with his oratorio, which is supposed to be about everything, is really just a rehash of Bronowski's Ascent of Man, and it's Darwinian. You get animals and human beings at the end, striking rather a discordant note. That's probably the nearest thing I can think of that a major Western composer has attempted in the last 100 years to actually get to the heart of this question of creation. So for me, the problem is, what would a major musical presentation of the monotheistic idea of creation actually look like, given our current worldview, science, sensibilities, artistic possibilities. I'm really not sure. So sorry to end with two sort of not sures, but those are my principal reactions.
It is interesting how these two of the pieces mention death pretty prominently. Or, I think Ari's piece. Sorry, I think it's interesting how at least two of the pieces really do mention death prominently. And I was just so moved by your piece, Ari. I hear the clock ticking in a very ominous way, but then I hear the bells singing, which could signal a funeral, right? But I also hear the pealing of bells of joy, like the laughter of children, especially because you said it quite high. And so I felt there was a calm and a peace in your composition that connected the death and the life that's present in your interpretation of the text. I wondered if it might be worth looking, or maybe since we've had a chance to hear both the piece a couple of times, but if it's worth talking a little bit more specifically about your responses to each individual piece, and maybe since I mentioned yours right now, maybe you could ask Danielle and Giles to maybe say a couple words about how they hear Ari's piece reflecting the themes tonight.
Yes, so I think there were two main thoughts that I had. The first was the relationship between the voice and the piano. It felt to me like at some points they were very connected, and at other points they were quite disparate. You've got quite a lot of dissonance between the two, which kind of really emphasises it. To me, it felt like there was the kind of the human voice in Rumi's text, and then there was the world around, and sort of almost the inevitability of not being in control of what's going on around. And that was one thing. The other thing, this is probably just me, and possibly completely coincidental, but having been brought up in Jewish liturgy, the very, very opening, the second time I heard it, reminded me very much of the very famous Kol Nidre, which has been made famous by Ashbrook. That's sort of falling semitone, but also with its long note at the very beginning, falling down. And it made my mind go on a little wonder about the connections between the Kol Nidre in terms of its place at the very beginning of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when we're reflecting on this idea of being sealed in the book of life for another year, this idea of cyclical religious things coming over and over again, and the nature of your piece and the nature of the topic of creation. So those are my two overarching thoughts on that. So thank you very much.
And revealed something of my secrets.
Thank you. Well, I just found this piece so moving. I think just to start with the sort of physical aspects of performance was the first thing that occurred to me as a sort of keen amateur pianist. Thinking of this theme of decreation and recreation, the actual physical deconstruction of the piano that's required in order to be able to get those muted strings, and then this plucking that's going on. So, disrupting, as it were, the normal mechanical operation of the instruments to create something quite different, something more sort of elemental in terms of the string of instruments, the plucking rather than hitting something that really struck me. And then just thinking of this piece especially was one that made me think about rhythm, and how rhythm in relation to creation. Obviously we had the sort of, as you mentioned, the kind of ticking of the clock, this kind of mechanical rendering of time, the thing that makes it so real and so present and so manageable, but also allows us to deny, in a sense, its passing, even as we note it. But also actually of rhythm as a pulse, actually thinking of the human pulse and the sort of heartbeat, something that occurred to me when hearing that rhythmic motif. And the fact that it was disrupted towards the end. I think it was four beats and then it sort of skipped, as it were. I thought that was rather lovely. And then just thinking at the very end, which I found extraordinary. I don't know the original text here, but just here in the English, this notion of drowning, of being drowned, set to these extraordinary sinking tones as it's sort of falling beneath the waves on the surface of the waters of this sea of love. But again, this extraordinary extended exploration of note ends, and yet the breath continues. But the mouth opens reminded me of the end of Mahler's 9th Symphony, where the note just sort of hovers ambiguously until it may or may not have ended, and we're not quite sure actually really where it's ended or not. And then we get kind of story sort of comes back in again. So, anyway, so this is just some scattered thoughts about what I enjoyed about it. So, thank you.
It's complex, isn't it? Especially when we think in terms of the ideas that perhaps religious inspiration snap into our heads when we think about the concept of creation, but it isn't just a single ex-nihil point of light. We tend to think of the creation of the physical world, we tend to think of the creation of the biotic animal world, we tend to think of the creation of human beings, which is in all our scriptures quite differently treated to the rest of what's going on. And sometimes I think in Western musical tradition, percussion can be used to represent the sort of minimal, angular, arithmetical, geometrical aspects of creation, whereas strings in particular tend to represent the sort of gentle, cyclical features of spring, autumn, and then humanity, certainly in the Islamic tradition, something like Ruby would indicate, wind instruments. Isn't necessarily from which these extracts are taken, beginning with a kind of musical imagery. Where he's saying human beings are like a reed that has been played and whose sound is the lament of the nostalgia of the reed for the reed bed from which it came. So this kind of Platonic idea of a primordial recollection there. Certainly in the way in which instrumentation is used in many Islamic traditions, of course, there's lots of different universes of music out there. That quite often is a way in which these three orders of creation are conceptualized, with percussion, and then the strings, and then the use of wind as it were from the breath, and the most intimate because it comes from within us, whereas percussion and strings, of course, don't.
Ari, do you want to say anything about it, please?
I'd like to add a few more words for that mentioning of colibri, because it was in my mind actually, and you nailed it. It definitely wasn't explicit or intended to be recognized, but it was definitely there. In fact, there is a similarity in humanity, but it's also important. I mean, how can I say? Back up. Anyhow, I wanted to say about the cyclical ideas that come back in the Northeast. Obviously, the ticking of the clock is something that is very direct and can be recognized by anyone, but it does represent also the cyclical elements. I mean, the seasons, day and night, all sorts of things, and I am very much busy doing things in my music with that sort of. There's two I can say it briefly. There's two Jungian's laws. One is the law of continuity, which says if a process begins, it's going to continue, obviously, until something happens. The second law is the law of ending. That everything that starts, every process that begins comes to an end, which is kind of Buddhist ideology or belief. And then there is a sort of interplay between those two ideas that actually forms everything in music all the way throughout history, where you can actually identify where processes in music begin and where they come to an end. And that has to do with all sorts of psychological laws of perception, things like that. And that's very much something I'm all the time aware of when I write. how many times can something repeat until the time comes where you feel it has to end? So that's really what forms the length of those ticking clock. And it also represents in the general idea the fact that all life ends with death, but then it starts again. So then I just wanted to refer to what you said about appropriation of, and I was kind of struck by what you said as a kind of, or I think it was maybe a criticism, that composers are not very much, you can't consider, I mean, unless I would decide to make a really academic study of Rumi, then you're right, then you'll be grounds for criticism. But all I did was look for text, which was in English to start with. I did not like the first translation I saw, therefore I tried to make it somewhat less romantic floral writing, which is absolutely contradictory, I'm sure, to how real things sound. But I think I'm not really seeing what appropriation there. I just showed something that spoke to me in the most direct way, and I'm sure the same goes for Samia, who does understand the language, actually.
It's perfect so that we have, for someone who wrote the text as well as performed it in Samia's piece, so I wanted to move on and talk about a little bit your responses to it.
One of the thoughts I had before I came here today was thinking about the role of music. It's one of the questions that Adele sort of was thinking about. And I think the quality of music is that it's very personal and that it's also very communal. And I think your piece really summed that up, partly because you were a solo voice sharing it with a community, but also because of what you said about it being something that we had to, or not had to, you know, encouraged to join in. I was really glad you said that, because when the first time I heard it struck me as something that felt very natural with the way it was set, the way that you were performing it as well. And for me, the thing that stayed with me was actually your performance of it in yourself, because you really did sort of engage us, you inspired us to join in. And so from that point of view, I think it really worked as a piece of music to bring a community together. And we're all from different backgrounds, but we all sang together, and it was very lovely. And so I just wanted to say thank you, because it just made me smile, and I really enjoyed listening and watching to you as a performer as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly agree entirely with what Danielle was just saying. I think the thing that came up for me the first time hearing it was this, we talked about repetition, actually with Padley's piece, but this question of what these repeated motifs and refrains really are doing with us as an audience. And similarly, I had the thought that this has a sort of call and response sort of structure, and it's nice that was then made explicit. I suppose that had me just thinking theologically about how you might think of creations involving a kind of enfolding, which is the sort of image, sort of spatial image, but one I think was walking through this repeated refrain that comes in each time. It's sung, the notes may be the same, but the sentiment is not, because you move on, you've sung what's coming in between that. And I'm thinking of that sort of structure in which it's created, I think is really interesting, but especially just this open invitation and the sort of invitational quality of that sort of music as something that we might be talking about in terms of the theology of creation, this idea that creation might actually address us, or might be the way through which God addresses us, and which invites perhaps even demands something like a response, or certainly a kind of participation, to use a very philosophically loaded word. We're thinking of creation as something that participates and the being of its creator, because that's how it exists for me in the first place. And I think all of those are things that resonated for me as the song sing, especially this sort of congregational singing.
Yeah, that's something that struck me as well, and I think probably the refrain is one of the oldest forms of human culture. It goes way back to the Upper Paleolithic probably, and speaks to something very elemental in ourselves, that there's something magical, mystical, shamanistic about listening to the human voice, particularly if it's invoking unseen realities. And the tribe joining in, I think, is something that triggers an archaic but authentic part of the brain. I think it's probably very therapeutic for us to be joining in rather than the Western tradition. The audience is terrified even to cough, and if somebody coughs or the phone goes off, they don't dare to appear at the concert hall for the next 10 years. It's a very, I think, natural aspect of what music ought to be. Another thing I liked was the use of what I take to be gently Celtic fringe harmonies, rather than those that we stereotypically associate with sort of Central Asia, which is the modal music and the rhythms, which are very complex and actually very difficult for the Western ear, because if you tell somebody in the Wigmore Hall there's actually a note between B and B flat, and that's really important in Iran, they could look for the exit immediately, and it is very difficult for the Western ear to register that. So I think probably you're putting it into that particular, almost intertwined style of music is a rather wise thing to do, because there are certainly historic connections even between the Celtic fringe and the Middle East. If you look at the Book of Kells, if you look at some of the percussion instruments, I was reading about this really recently, that the Irish drum, the bodhran, actually seems to have Middle Eastern origins, the open drum, where the timbre is controlled. So to use that, a voice from the Islamic world, using tonalities and rhythms that come from a part of Europe that seems to be geographically the most removed from the Islamic world, and show that actually there are commonalities and the real exist of a kind of continuum rather than there being an iron curtain between East and West. I find personally symbolically, but also musically very successful.
Thank you all very much. I mean, it was wonderful also that you joined in, and I came back to my seat thinking, this is the power of music. And it's very simple. I mean, you know, you're very kind, but actually I was never trained as a musician, so I just sing from my heart and I sing from my experience. I have had training as an adult, but I don't come from a tradition where music is encouraged. I don't come from a background where I'm actually allowed to do what I've just done. So each time I do it, it's, okay, this is who I am, and it's the power of music, and it's the power of expressing your own inner truth through music, but also making that connection. And I think this is, for me, one of the things that when Del asked me to do this, I thought, well, I'll do it, because I think music is really powerful, and it can connect us across different backgrounds and different geographies and different all sorts of things, and that in a way singing something really simple like that together is a celebration of what's the same about us rather than the thing that we keep being told about how we're different. So in terms of like talking about creation or talking about whatever we're talking about, it's that basic kind of humanity that for me is what I'm trying to get to. Yeah.
I'll just say today we created something that will never exist again. Like the collection of voices in this room as we sang along to your music. It's never going to happen ever again. Your piece will live on and be probably a #1 hit. But even if it's a #1 hit, it'll never sound like it sounded here. We were the co-creators of this ephemeral experience. It's beautiful. We don't have a lot of time left, and as much as I'd like to hear all about my piece from the panel, and I'd be happy if people just wanted to chat with me over a glass of wine. But perhaps I'd like just for a moment ask for maybe a quick response from each of you about my piece. And if you want to email me later, you can tell me.
Well, let's keep it quick so we can have some champagne.
I sort of said a little bit before about this idea of building on what's come before, and from what I know of your music, having heard some of it now, you like to take musical risks and like to sort of play with music, and you can really hear that in this piece. And I think credit to the performers as well, because you could see it in what they were doing as well. It's not dramatic at the beginning, the change to ragtime, to various other things as well. And you really needed that to make the point that was being made in the poem. And so from my point of view, I really appreciated that as a start. Thank you.
I love this, and for me, just thinking of how I'm connected to a sort of theological creation. For me, one of the word that comes most of the film is playfulness. There is a sort of play, and obviously it's there in sort of pastiche, but really capturing the playfulness of the poem, but in ways that make it resonate anew and hearing new connections. So I love the motivity in this. Well, I wrote down my sort of note that in the bucketing that Almighty's conceived gods, I wrote comically portentous, a sort of description of these units of octave rising figures, which then there's just a hint of actually right at the end in the incomparable couch of death. So I love that sort of resonance, where suddenly the thing that you have registered before as being in a kind of comic vein now takes on a sort of shadow side, as it were, and the ability of music to look in both directions at once, I think, and to recall those kinds of ambiguities was something that really struck me. And I love the passage right near the beginning. There's a sort of 3/4 section in the Pope leaves the naughty thumb, where these rising motifs from the piano that were reminiscent of green light sprouting and kind of sort of things coming up through the soil. That was really, really lovely. So, thank you.
Yeah, I engaged with it quite a lot. I thought, after a while, of Benjamin Britten and Peter Pearce and the Michelangelo sonnets. There's a very similar kind of dialogue between the tenor voice and the keyboard, and a certain awareness of the need not to be too playful, but not to be too somber, and to give way to the way in which notes succeed each other in modern music, and certainly the way in which the singer delivered it reminded me very much of that tradition. So its relation to the idea of creation, that's probably a bridge too far for me. I don't really know how to convey the sense, the tonality, a musical message in words, but if you say so.
Just to compliment you, knowing the métier of a composer, I think you've done an extraordinary job of that text, because the insight into it, being able to make these changes between sections and make it work, the coherent is fantastic. I really love that.
Well, I think what's interesting, particularly about music in this particular context, is that unlike visual art, it does exist in time, right? How do we organize time through pattern, through repetition, through duration, right? And it forces us to think of and experience time differently. And when we think about creation comes from where? Either from something that was always existent or something that wasn't. Both of those are mind-blowing ways that force us to think about time. And of course, science of the 20th century has forced us to think about time differently through relativity, etc. So I think, in particular, I think that music worked really well, can work very well for a discussion of creation, because it makes us think about time. It makes us experience this theme in time while also playing with our sense of time. Thank you so much to our panelists, to the musicians, to our wonderful performers, to the Woolf Institute, the Spalding Trust, to Westminster College. It's been again, I appreciate it, and to you for listening and being such a wonderful audience. Please continue the conversation over some drinks behind us. Thank you very much.